Last Christmas, I thought I'd found solace in a quiet cabin, a refuge from the chaos of family gatherings. But the snow outside held secrets, and the man who knocked on my door wore a smile that hid something sinister. In that isolated place, I learned how quickly trust can turn to terror, and how close I came to never leaving. Christmas 2024 was supposed to be a balm for my soul. At 29, I'd grown weary of the holidays' chaos. Too many relatives, too much noise, all crammed into my cousin's 3-bedroom house in the middle of nowhere. I loved my family, but the thought of 30 people shouting over each other made my skin itch. So I'd rented an Airbnb, a small cabin tucked in a forest just outside town, promising peace and a bed to call my own. The drive out was long, the roads winding through snow-dusted pines, the air sharp with winter's bite. When I arrived, the cabin stood alone. Its wooden walls weathered its chimney, puffing faint smoke into the gray sky. It was perfect quiet, remote mine. The first 2 days were a blur of warmth. I spent mornings at my cousin's, watching kids tear into presents, their laughter echoing through the house. Breakfast was a feast. Pancakes, bacon, coffee that burned my tongue. I caught up with aunts and uncles I hadn't seen in years, their stories pulling me back to simpler times. By Christmas Day, the crowd had swelled the house, a cacophony of voices and clinking glasses. I stayed until dinner, my head throbbing from the chaos, then drove back to the cabin as dusk settled, the forest swallowing the last light. I pulled up to the cabin, my headlights cutting through the dark, illuminating a blanket of fresh snow. As I stepped out, my boots sank into the powder, the silence so thick it pressed against my ears. The air was frigid, my breath clouding in front of me. I slung my bag over my shoulder, my eyes scanning the clearing. That's when I saw them footprints in the snow, leading to the front door. They were fresh, the edges sharp, stopping just short of the porch. My heart stuttered. The host maybe checking in. But it was Christmas Day late, and the tracks didn't lead away. They just stopped. I shook it off, telling myself it was nothing. The host could have come by earlier, maybe to check the pipes or the heater. I unlocked the door, the key cold against my fingers, and stepped inside. The cabin smelled of pine and old wood, the fireplace glowing faintly in the living room. I tossed my jacket on the couch, sank into a worn sofa chair, and let the warmth seep into me. My phone buzzed with family texts, but I ignored them, too tired to reply. I thought about texting the host, asking about the footprints, but if it was important, he'd have left a note, right? I closed my eyes, the crackle of the fire lulling me, and drifted off. 10 minutes later, a sharp ring jolted me awake. The doorbell, loud and insistent, cut through the quiet. I rubbed my eyes, disoriented, my heart racing from the suddenness. Who's here? At this hour, I stood, smoothing my hair, and moved to the door, peering through the peephole. A man stood on the porch, his face lit by the faint glow of a lantern. Medium build, black hair, brown jacket, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He looked ordinary, but something about him felt off, like a photo slightly out of focus. I opened the door, the cold rushing in. "Hey," he said, his voice clipped, too cheerful for the hour. "I'm the host. Just need to check a few things." He extended a hand, and I shook it. His grip too tight, his skin clammy. Sensory overload. The air bites your face. The lantern's light flickers. His smile is a mask, and your pulse races, warning you to step back. I nodded, still groggy, letting him steer the conversation. He asked about my stay, his words practiced, but his eyes darted around, scanning the porch, the trees, the dark beyond. "Sure, come in," I said, my voice autopilot, regretting it the moment the words left my mouth. Pattern, interruption. This is just a routine check, but why is he here now on Christmas in the dark? He stepped inside his boots, leaving wet patches on the floor. I followed him into the living room, where he stood, staring at the walls, his head tilting, as if searching for something. The fire cast shadows that danced across his face, sharpening the unease in my gut. Why is he here? Why now? The cabin felt smaller, the walls pressing in the air, thick with something I couldn't name. He moved slowly, his fingers brushing the mantel, his gaze lingering on corners that held nothing but dust. "Just checking the place," he said, but his voice was hollow, like he was reciting lines. I watched my tiredness giving way to a creeping dread. Nested storytelling. I remembered a story from a friend about a renter who found a hidden camera in an Airbnb tucked in a smoke detector. What if this guy wasn't the host? What if he was here for something else? The thought rooted me to the spot, my hands clenching at my sides. "Hey," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Can you come back tomorrow? I've got family coming soon." It was a lie, but I needed him gone. He froze his hand, hovering over a shelf, his head turning slowly to face me. His smile was gone, replaced by a stiff, almost angry expression, his eyes cold and unyielding. Trance. Loop. He's just the host, but is he? You're safe here. But are you? He's leaving. But will he? My stomach churned, every instinct screaming to run. But my keys and phone were on the couch, out of reach. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked toward the front door, his steps deliberate. Relief flickered in me. He's leaving. But then he stopped his hand on the knob. He turned it, not to open, but to lock it, the deadbolt sliding into place with a heavy thud. My heart stopped, the sound echoing in my chest. He's not leaving. I bolted for the bedroom, my socks slipping on the wood floor, and slammed the door behind me, twisting the lock. His footsteps followed heavy, purposeful stopping. Just outside, the door rattled his shoulder, hitting it, the wood groaning under the force. "Open the door," he said, his voice low, calm, terrifying. I backed away, my eyes darting around the room. A window, an old crank-operated hatch, sat at the far wall. I ran to it, my hands shaking as I turned the handle, the glass cold against my fingers. The door shook again, louder, the lock straining. Embedded command. Move. Now get out. Don't look back. He's coming, isn't he? I pushed the window open, the icy air flooding in, and squeezed through my jacket, snagging on the frame. I landed in the snow. My breath ragged the forest, a wall of black around me. I ran my boots, sinking branches, clawing at my face. Behind me, the cabin door burst open. I heard, it felt it even from the trees. I glanced back, seeing his silhouette in the doorway, scanning the dark. I ducked behind a pine, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the wind. He stood there, motionless, for what felt like hours, his lantern swinging its light, cutting through the snow. Then, finally, he turned, got into a car I hadn't noticed, and drove off, the tail lights fading into the night. I waited, shivering my breath, fogging the air, until I was sure he was gone. I crept back to the cabin, my phone and keys still on the couch. I grabbed them, hands trembling, and dialed 911, my voice breaking as I explained. The police arrived, their flashlights sweeping the snow. The cabin now a crime scene. The real host came later, his face pale, confirming he hadn't been there, hadn't sent anyone. The footprints, the lock, the men, they were all wrong, a violation of the safety I'd trusted. The investigation found nothing. No prints, no car, no trace. The man had known the cabin was an Airbnb, had used that to get inside. But why? To rob, to hurt. The questions gnawed at me, each one a splinter in my mind. I left the next day, the cabin's warmth now a lie, its walls too thin to keep out the dark. I don't trust strangers anymore. Every knock, every unfamiliar face carries his shadow, that stiff smile, those cold eyes. Anchoring. That night changed you, didn't it? Every time you hear a doorbell, you freeze, don't you? I check locks obsessively, avoid rentals, and dread the quiet of isolated places. The cabin was supposed to be my escape, but it became a trap, a reminder that safety is fragile, that a lie can walk through your door and wear a human face. There's one detail I kept to myself. As I ran, I saw something in the snow near the cabin, a glint half buried. A key, small and rusted. Not mine, not the host's. I didn't touch it, didn't tell the police, too scared to know what it opened. But I see it in my dreams, that key and him waiting in the dark, holding the lock to something I'll never understand. Good. The knock on my door that Christmas night wasn't Santa. It was a ghost from my past, come to shatter my solitude with a blade in his hand. I was alone for the first time on Christmas, a choice born of necessity rather than desire. The flight to my hometown was too expensive, and work had chained me to a schedule that left no room for travel. My apartment, a small haven in a quiet neighborhood, was my refuge, decked with a few strings of lights and a second-hand wreath to keep the holiday spirit alive. I'd spent the morning on FaceTime with my family. Their laughter, a bittersweet echo through the screen. And now at dusk, I was ready to settle into a quiet evening, the Grinch cartoon playing softly in the background. The air was crisp, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones, and a light snow had dusted the street outside, blanketing the world in a hush. I stepped onto the porch to grab the mail, my slippers crunching against the fresh powder. That's when I saw them, footprints frozen in the snow, pressed deep into the wood of my porch. They weren't fresh, not dusted with the powdery top layer, but hard-edged, like they'd been there since the night before, when the temperature had plummeted below freezing. My breath caught a cloud forming in the air as I scanned the street. It was empty, the houses glowing with Christmas lights, their warmth a stark contrast to the chill creeping up my spine. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was the mail carrier, a neighbor, anyone harmless. But the footprints were deliberate, leading straight to my door and stopping as if someone had stood there, waiting, watching. I grabbed the mail bills, a card from my mom, and hurried back inside, locking the door behind me. The apartment felt different now, the warmth of my holiday setup tainted by a nagging unease. I busied myself with opening gifts sent by my family, the rustle of wrapping paper, a distraction from the memory of those prints. The TV droned on the Grinch's voice, a familiar comfort, but my eyes kept darting to the windows, half expecting to see a face pressed against the glass. By mid-afternoon, the sky had darkened, the snow picking up, and I decided to take a walk to clear my head. I bundled up in a scarf and coat, the cold biting at my fingertips as I stepped outside. The neighborhood was a postcard of Christmas lights, twinkling wreaths on doors, the air heavy with the promise of more snow. I walked the familiar loop, my boots leaving fresh tracks in the snow, the silence soothing my nerves. But then I saw him, a man on the other side of the street, walking in the same direction, his pace slow, deliberate. He wore a dark jacket, a baseball cap pulled low, obscuring his face. I didn't think much of it at first. People walk even on Christmas. But a few minutes later, he passed me again, his path looping back, his cap still hiding his eyes. My stomach twisted, a flicker of doubt sparking. Had he turned around right after passing me? The street wasn't a circle. He'd have had to double back deliberately. I quickened my pace, the snow crunching underfoot, my breath visible in the cold. The neighborhood felt less like a postcard, now the lights dimmer, the silence heavier. I reached a fork in the path. One way led deeper into the neighborhood, the other back to my apartment. Something in my gut, sharp and insistent, told me to go home. I turned back my steps, hurried the man's presence, lingering in my mind, like a shadow I couldn't shake. I reached my door, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. I'd barely kicked off my boots when it came a heavy knock, sharp and demanding, rattling the door in its frame. My heart slammed against my ribs, my body frozen just inside the entryway. I edged toward the peephole, my breath shallow, and peered out. The man stood there, his cap tilted down his face, a blur of shadow. He was close, too close, his body pressed against the door, like he could sense me on the other side. He knocked again harder, the sound echoing through the apartment. I backed away, my voice trembling as I called out, "What do you need?" No answer. Just another knock, this one heavier, more insistent. My mind raced, replaying the footprints, the man on the street. Had he followed me? I called out again, louder. "What do you want?" "Who are you?" Silence. Then a sudden thud as he slammed his shoulder into the door, the wood groaning under the impact. My blood turned to ice, my hands fumbling for my phone on the counter. He hit the door again, the frame shaking each blow, a promise of what would happen if it gave way. I dialed 911, my voice barely coherent as I whispered to the operator, "Someone's trying to break into my apartment." Before the call could connect, I heard shouts Outside, sharp, authoritative voices, cutting through the snow. I risked another look through the peephole and saw 2 police officers, their flashlights sweeping the porch, pinning the man in their glare. He froze, his hands raised the cap, still hiding his face. They cuffed him, their voices a blur as they led him away. I opened the door, my legs weak, and told the officers everything. The footprints, the man on the street, the pounding on my door. They listened, their faces grim, and then one of them said something that stopped my heart. "We know him. He's your ex, my ex." The word was a blade slicing through 6 years of distance. I hadn't seen him since our breakup, a messy end to a toxic relationship that had left me bruised emotionally and otherwise. He'd moved out of state, or so I thought, our contact severed like a cut wire. But now he was here on my porch on Christmas with 2 knives in his pockets, a firearm in his car parked blocks away, and a roll of duct tape bought just days before. The police said a neighbor had called them, reporting a man pacing the street for hours, lingering outside my apartment, watching. They'd arrived just in time, a miracle I didn't deserve, but clung to. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room. The Grinch still paused on the TV, the wreath on the door, mocking the holiday's promise of peace. The police took him away, but his presence lingered a stain on my home. They found no confession, no explanation for why he'd come back, why he'd chosen Christmas to reappear with weapons and intent. I moved the locks, added cameras, but they're just bandages on a wound that won't heal. He knew where I lived. He'd been watching me. The thought is a splinter in my mind, sharp and unrelenting, surfacing every time I see a shadow outside or hear a knock. Christmas is different now. Its warmth replaced by a chill that lingers in my bones. I check the porch every morning, half expecting to see those footprints again, frozen in the snow. My apartment, once a sanctuary, feels like a stage, with me as the unaware actor, watched by eyes I can't see. What if he comes back? What if he's not done? The knives, the tape, the gun, they weren't for nothing. And somewhere in the quiet of another Christmas, I fear he's waiting, his cap pulled low, his shadow ready to knock again. Snow fell like a shroud that night, cloaking the road in silence and secrets. I was stranded, my car crippled, when a whistle led me to a scene that burned itself into my soul. A man, a fire, and a woman who'd never see the stars again. He saw me, and in that moment, I became his prey, running for my life from a killer who vanished into the dark. Last winter, I was 27, a security guard, working odd hours to keep my apartment's lights on. My shifts were chaotic, often ending in the small hours when the world slept. That night, I'd clocked out at 1 a.m., my bones aching from hours on my feet. The drive home was 30 miles, a lonely stretch of back roads, winding through fields and forests. Snow had started falling soft at first, then heavier, blanketing the road in a white haze. My old sedan groaned under the strain, its heater barely keeping the cold at bay. I turned on the radio, a crackling pop song, my only company, trying to stay awake, to feel alive in the dead of night. 15 minutes in the car lurched a sharp jolt, throwing me forward. A loud pop echoed the steering wheel, fighting my grip as I pulled over the tires, sinking into the snow. I cursed under my breath, stepping out into the cold, my boots crunching on the icy ground. The air bit my skin, my breath fogging in front of me. I grabbed a flashlight from the trunk, its beam cutting through the swirling flakes, and checked the damage. A flat tire, the rim kissing the asphalt. Of all nights, the road was desolate. No headlights, no houses, just snow and silence stretching into the dark. I stood there, weighing my options. My phone showed no bars, the signal swallowed by the wilderness. I could wait for help, but who'd come this way at 9 p.m. in a storm? I could try to change the tire, but the cold numbed my fingers, and I hadn't done it in years. Sensory overload. The snow stings your face. The cold seeps into your bones. The flashlight trembles, and the silence presses heavy. Waiting. Then a sound, a low melodic whistle drifting through the trees, faint but unmistakable. My heart skipped a mix of hope and unease. Someone's out here. I swept the flashlight, its beam catching a glint of red. A Chevy parked under a tree, 100 yards off, half hidden by snow. The whistle grew clearer, a tune too romantic for this frozen wasteland. I hesitated, my gut urging me to stay put, but the promise of help, a spare tire, a phone, pushed me forward. I trudged toward the sound, the snow soaking my jeans, the flashlight shaking in my grip. Pattern, interruption. You're alone, stranded. But that whistle, it's human, isn't it? Or is it something else? The whistle led me to a clearing, an open patch of snow near a cliff's edge. The starry sky above, a cruel contrast to the cold below. A fire pit glowed its flames, dancing under a sagging canopy. Two figures sat close, a man and a woman, his arm around her, her long blonde hair spilling over his shoulder. He was whistling, his voice soft, murmuring words I couldn't catch. The scene felt intimate, almost tender, but something was wrong. The air was too still, the forest too quiet. the man's gaze too fixed on the stars. I stepped closer, my boots silent in the snow, drawn by curiosity and need. Nested storytelling. Last summer, a coworker told me about a couple he'd found camping in the woods. Their fire bright, but their faces blank, like they were hiding something. He'd left them alone, but the memory stuck, a warning I ignored now. The man's voice drifted to me, low and playful, but edged with something darker. Ever wonder if the stars are watching us? He said, his fingers tracing patterns in the air. They see everything. They know everything. He chuckled, a sound that didn't belong sharp, unsteady, like a blade catching on bone. The woman didn't move, didn't speak, her head resting against him. My stomach twisted, a prickle of dread climbing my spine. He leaned closer, whispering, "I told them about you. They're excited to meet you." His laugh was louder now, giddy, unhinged, as if he shared a secret with the night. I froze, my flashlight heavy in my hand, my breath shallow. He's not right. This isn't right. I shifted my foot, brushing a twig. The snap shattering the silence. The man's head whipped toward me, his eyes glinting in the firelight. Trance loop. He's just a camper. But is he? You're hidden. But are you? He sees you, doesn't he? My hand trembled. The flashlight beam, wavering, and I raised it, the light spilling across his face. Blood streaks of it smeared across his cheeks, his jacket, his hands. His smile was calm. Too calm, a twisted curve that knew something I didn't. "Don't be scared," he said, his voice soft, almost soothing. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he pushed the woman away. She fell back, her body limp, her face revealed in the fire's glow. I choked on a scream. Her eyes were gone, hollow sockets crusted with frozen blood, her cheeks pale, her mouth slack. She'd been dead for hours, her body propped like a doll. The man stood, his smile unchanging, his eyes locked on mine. My boots slipped as I backed away, the snow betraying my steps. He moved slow at first, then faster, his boots heavy, deliberate. "Wait!" he called, his voice harsh, too close. "I'm not gonna hurt you." I turned and ran my flashlight, bobbing the forest, a maze of shadows and snow. My heart pounded, drowning out the wind. My breath ragged in my throat. Embedded command. "Run. Now? Don't stop. Don't look back. He's coming, isn't he?" I glanced over my shoulder. seeing him sprint, his silhouette growing larger, a glint in his hand, a claw hammer raised high. I reached my car, fumbling with the door, my keys slipping in my numb fingers. I dove inside, slamming the lock, my chest heaving. He stopped at the window, his face inches from the glass, his smile gone, replaced by a cold, predatory stare. He tilted his head, studying me, then raised the hammer, the metal gleaming in my headlights. The glass cracked under the first blow, a web of fractures spreading. I screamed, my hands shaking as I started the engine, the car lurching forward. He raised the hammer again, but headlights flared behind him. A pickup truck, its beam blinding. He froze his eyes, darting to the truck, then back to me, fury twisting his face. He turned and ran, vanishing into the trees, the snow swallowing his tracks. I stumbled out, waving down the truck. An old man at the wheel, his face etched with concern. I begged him to take me to the police, my voice breaking the image of her face. Those empty sockets burned into my mind. The police searched the clearing, but found only the canopy and a dying fire. No blood, no body, no Chevy. They questioned me, their voices gentle but skeptical, as if I'd dreamed it all. I showed them my car, the cracked window, a silent witness, but it wasn't enough. They scoured the woods for a week, found nothing. No woman, no man, no hammer. The case went cold, a file buried in a drawer, but not for me. I see her every night, her face a ghost in my dreams, and him, his smile, his eyes, waiting to finish what he started. I don't drive those roads anymore. The snow, once beautiful, is a shroud hiding horrors. Anchoring. That night scarred you, didn't it? Every time it snows, you see him. Don't you? I check my locks, my windows, my mirrors, always expecting his face in the shadows. The police said I was lucky that the truck saved me. But luck feels like a lie when fear is my constant companion. I moved to the city, traded my car for buses, but the dark still whispers his name. There's one thing I didn't tell them. As I ran, I saw something in the snow near the fire. A necklace, silver. Its pendant, a small star half buried. I left it there, too terrified to touch it, but I know it was hers. A piece of her stolen by him. I see it in my nightmares, glinting under the stars, and him out there watching, waiting for me to break the silence he demanded. The silence of the snowy valley wasn't peaceful. It was a predator, waiting to unveil the horror that stared at me through the cabin window. I'd driven 3 hours to reach the log cabin, A solitary retreat nestled in a mountain valley, its weathered logs promising escape from the city's chaos. The snow fell steadily, blanketing the world in a hush so profound it felt like the earth had stopped breathing. I stepped out of my car, my boots sinking into the powder, the air sharp with pine and frost. The cabin stood alone, a relic against the endless white, its chimney trailing a thin wisp of smoke. I was here to recharge, to find peace in isolation. But peace I'd learn was a lie this place couldn't keep. The caretaker, Toro, met me at the door, his lantern casting a warm glow across his weathered face. His eyes, sunken and shadowed, held a weight I couldn't place, like he'd seen too much of this valley. He showed me the cabin's interior, creaking floors, a stone fireplace, a kitchen with a single window overlooking the snow-draped forest. The scent of aged wood clung to the air, comforting yet heavy, like a memory I couldn't grasp. Toro moved quickly, explaining the basics, where to find firewood, how to work the stove. But as he turned to leave, he paused, his hand on the doorknob, his gaze fixed on the darkening woods outside. "Stay out of the forest after sunset," he said, his voice low, urgent. "No matter what you hear." I nodded, a half smile masking my amusement. I'd grown up in cities where warnings were about traffic or pickpockets, not shadowy woods. Toro's words felt like folklore, a story to spook tourists. He left without another word, his lantern bobbing into the snow until it vanished. I locked the door, the bolt sliding into place with a reassuring thud, and set about unpacking. The cabin was mine for the week, a sanctuary of solitude. I took a hot shower, the steam curling around me, and cooked a simple dinner, the sizzle of vegetables in the pan, a counterpoint to the silence outside. I sat at the table, a glass of wine in hand, watching snowflakes dance in the glow of the porch light. The fireplace cast flickering shadows across the walls, their movement almost alive. Halfway through my meal, it happened. A scream tore through the night, raw and human. A man's voice twisted in agony. My fork froze mid-air, my heart slamming against my ribs. The sound was close, too close, echoing from the forest just beyond the clearing. It wasn't an animal, not with that pitch, that desperation. Another scream followed sharper, then cut off abruptly, as if something had silenced it forever. My breath caught my eyes darting to the window, where the snow fell unbroken, indifferent to the horror it hid. Toro's warning rang in my ears, but the screams demanded action, a pull stronger than fear. I grabbed my coat, my hands trembling as I zipped it up and snatched a flashlight from the counter. The beam cut through the dim kitchen, its light cold and unyielding. I hesitated at the door, my hand on the bolt. Toro's words, a weight in my chest. But the silence now was worse, a void where a man's life might have ended. I couldn't stay inside, not with that sound burned into my mind. I stepped into the snow, the cold biting through my boots, the flashlight's beam sweeping the clearing. The forest loomed ahead, its trees black silhouettes against the white, their branches heavy with snow. I called out, "Is anyone there?" My voice sounded small, swallowed by the valley's hush. Another scream, fainter but unmistakable, came from deeper in the woods. My pulse raced, a drumbeat, urging me forward. The snow was heavier now, clinging to my coat, my breath forming clouds in the air. I followed the sound, the flashlight beam shaking in my hand, catching glimpses of tracks, human fresh, leading into the trees. The forest closed around me, its silence oppressive, broken only by the crunch of my steps. I reached a dense thicket, the trees so close, their branches tangled overhead, blocking the sky. A sound came from beyond the pines, low and wet, like something tearing through flesh. I froze, my breath shallow, the flashlight beam fixed on the thicket. My instincts screamed to turn back, but my feet moved forward, drawn by a morbid need to know. I pushed through the branches, the pine needles scraping my face, and emerged into a small clearing. There in the snow lay a man, his body sprawled, his chest torn open, blood steaming in the cold. Beside him crouched a figure, its back to me, long black hair spilling over its shoulders. It was a woman, her movements jerky, her hands buried in the man's body, pulling at something with a sickening rip. The flashlight beam caught her, and she turned her face, a nightmare carved in white. Her skin was pale as the snow, her eyes glowing like a beast's, two black dots on her forehead like ritual marks. Her mouth was smeared with blood, her teeth stained red, her lips curling into a smile that wasn't human. She stared at me, unblinking her gaze, a blade that pierced my soul. My scream caught in my throat, my body rooted to the spot. The flashlight slipped from my hand, its beam spinning across the snow, illuminating the man's face, eyes gone, mouth frozen in a silent cry. The woman tilted her head, her smile widening, and stood her movements fluid, predatory. I turned and ran my legs heavy, the snow dragging at my boots. The forest seemed to twist around me, the trees closer, the path gone. My breath burned in my chest, my heart a frantic rhythm. As I stumbled through the snow, I could feel her behind me, not running, but there, her presence, a weight on my back. I burst into the clearing, the cabin's lights a beacon through the storm. I reached the door, my hands fumbling with the lock, my fingers numb from cold and fear. I slammed it shut behind me, sliding the bolt, and pushed the couch against it, a desperate barrier against the night. The flashlight was gone, lost in the woods, but the cabin's lights burned bright, their glow a fragile shield. I sank to the floor, my back against the couch, my eyes fixed on the window. The snow fell outside, relentless, burying the world in white. I waited, my breath ragged, listening for her, for anything. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time blurred in the grip of fear. Then, in the pre-dawn light, I saw her. She stood outside the window, her white face pressed against the glass, her eyes locked on mine, her bloody smile etched into the night. The fireplace's glow reflected in her gaze, a mockery of warmth. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, my body paralyzed by her stare. The first rays of sunlight hit the window, and she was gone, as if the light had burned her away. I don't know how long I sat there, my mind replaying her face, her smile, the man's body in the snow. Toro arrived at noon, his knock pulling me from the haze. I opened the door, my hands shaking, and his eyes widened at my face. "You saw her, didn't you?" he whispered, his voice heavy with dread. The white-faced woman. I nodded, unable to speak, and packed my things in silence. As I handed him the keys, he gripped my arm, his eyes searching mine. "Don't come back," he said. I drove away, the cabin, shrinking in my rearview mirror, the valley's silence, a curse I'd never escape. That night haunts me a scar I can't erase. I see her face in every shadow, her smile in every quiet moment. The police found no body, no tracks, no proof of what I saw. But I know she's real, waiting in that valley, her hunger endless. What if she follows me? The thought is a chain binding me to that night, to the white-faced woman who smiled as she tore a man apart. In the fog of a winter morning, I ran through a city park, seeking the rhythm of my own breath. But the silence hid a woman whose pain would shatter my world. Her swing, a pendulum, counting down to a moment I'd never unsee. Her laughter, her fall, her end, they carved a wound in me, one that bleeds every time the mist rolls in. Winter 2024 was my season of discipline. At 28, I was a fitness instructor. My life a tapestry of gym sessions, meal plans, and early morning jogs. My body was my temple, sculpted through sweat and resolve, but my mind craved the quiet of dawn when the city still slept. The city park, a sprawling expanse of paths and trees, was my sanctuary, its winding trails, a place to outrun my thoughts. I'd jog there daily, the rhythm of my sneakers, a metronome for my soul. But last winter, something broke that rhythm, something that changed me forever. That morning, the world was cloaked in fog, a thick veil that blurred the edges of reality. I woke at 5 a.m., downed an Americano, its bitterness waking my senses, and ate a handful of almonds for fuel. I laced up my running shoes, their soles worn from countless miles, and stepped into the cold. The streets were empty, the sodium glow of streetlights swallowed by mist. My breath formed clouds, the air sharp against my cheeks, the silence heavy unbroken by birds or cars. Sensory overload. The fog wraps you tight. The cold bites your skin. Your footsteps echo, and the world feels hollow, waiting. I reached the park after 20 minutes, its gates looming like sentinels in the haze. The trails were deserted. The grass frosted the trees, skeletal, their branches clawing at the sky. The fountain, usually a cheerful gurgle, stood silent, its silhouette ghostly in the fog. I started my run, my pace steady, my heart finding its beat. But the quiet unnerved me. No chirping, no rustling, just the thud of my shoes and the rasp of my breath. I cursed myself for forgetting to charge my earbuds, their absence amplifying the park's eerie stillness. 10 minutes in a sound pierced the silence, a faint metallic scrape, like chains rubbing together. It grew louder as I followed the trail, the fog thinning slightly, revealing the playground ahead. Pattern interruption. This is just a run, your routine. But that sound, it's not natural. Is it? I slowed my eyes, scanning the mist, and saw her, a woman on a swing, swaying gently. Her head bowstowed her hair, a tangled curtain over her face. She was alone. Her figure small against the vastness of the park. Her skin was pale, almost gray. Her thin hands gripping the swing's chains. Her blue pullover tattered, its sleeves rolled up to reveal bony arms. The chains groaned with each sway, a mournful rhythm that matched the fog's weight. I stopped, my breath, catching my instincts, torn between moving closer and turning back. Nested storytelling. A month ago, a client told me about a homeless woman she'd seen in the park, muttering to herself, clutching a child's toy. I'd felt pity then, but now seeing her, I felt only unease. She didn't look up, didn't seem to notice me. her gaze fixed on the ground. I resumed my jog, the trail curving past the swings, my eyes flicking to her. Up close, she was worse. Her hair matted her face, gaunt, dark circles framing wide, unblinking eyes. I told myself she was harmless, just a woman lost in grief. But my skin prickled, a warning I couldn't shake. Trance. Loop. She's just sitting there. But is she? You're safe? Running, but are you? She's not looking. But is she? As I passed, I turned my head, unable to resist. Her face was blank, her lips moving faintly, as if whispering to the frost. I felt a pang of guilt she's suffering, and you're judging, and quickened my pace, the swings fading behind me. Then the chains stopped, the sound cutting off like a held breath. I froze, my heart lurching, and glanced back. She wasn't moving her swing. Still, her head tilted toward me. A smile crept across her face, slow and wrong, her eyes glinting in the fog. You know, she said, her voice low, shrill, cutting through the mist. Millie used to love swinging. My blood ran cold, sweat beading on my forehead despite the chill. Who's Millie? I asked, my voice trembling, regretting it instantly. She didn't answer, just stared. Her smile widening her eyes, unblinking, like she saw something beyond me. I took a step back, my sneakers sinking into the frost, my body urging me to run. Then she moved. The swing lurched forward, her legs kicking the chains, rattling violently. She swung higher, faster, her laughter erupting a manic, unhinged sound that echoed through the park. Her hair whipped around her face, her eyes wild, gleaming with a crazed light. The swing groaned, the metal straining her movements, reckless, unnatural. Embedded command. Get away. Don't watch. Don't stay. She's breaking, isn't she? I stood rooted, my heart pounding, unable to look away. Her laughter a blade against my nerves. She screamed Millie's name over and over, her voice raw, tearing the fog apart. Millie, Millie, she wailed, her body twisting with each swing, her hands slipping on the chains. I wanted to run, to call for help, but my legs were lead, my phone useless in the fog. The swing reached its peak, her body arcing against the sky, and then it happened. The chains jolted the metal, buckling under her frenzy. She flew forward, her body tumbling her neck, snapping as she hit the frozen ground. The sound a dull final thud. The laughter stopped. The park silent once more, the fog closing in like a shroud. Her body lay twisted her head at a sickening angle, blood trickling from her mouth, pooling in the frost. I staggered back, my breath ragged, my mind refusing to process what I'd seen. I fumbled for my phone, dialing 911, my voice shaking as I stammered the details. Her swing, her fall, her end. The operator's calm voice felt distant, a lifeline I couldn't grasp. Police and paramedics arrived, their lights piercing the fog, the park now a crime scene. I stood frozen, watching as they covered her body, her face hidden, her pain silenced. They asked me questions when I saw her, what she said, what happened, but my answers were fragments. My mind stuck on her eyes, her smile, her scream. Locals whispered her story. Her daughter, Millie, 5 years old, had died of pneumonia months ago. The loss had broken her, driven her to the park, to the swing where Millie once played, until grief claimed her too. I drove home, the fog lifting the city, waking its normalcy, a cruel mockery. Sleep eluded me, her face haunting my dreams, her laughter, her fall, her neck snapping like a twig. Anchoring. That morning changed you, didn't it? Every time you see fog, you hear her. Don't you? I stopped running in the mornings, trading dawn for dusk. The park's emptiness, too heavy to bear. I see her swing in every playground, hear her voice in every quiet moment, a ghost I can't outrun. There's one detail I kept to myself. As I left, I saw something in the frost near the swing, a small shoe, pink, child-sized, half buried. It wasn't hers, not an adult's, but Millie's. I knew. I didn't touch it, didn't tell the police, too shaken to face its meaning. But it's there, in my nightmares, that shoe and her swinging forever, calling a name I'll never forget. Last Christmas, I sought peace in a mountain cabin, craving the silence of snow and solitude. But the valley held a darkness older than the pines, a presence that watched from the shadows. Her face white as death, her smile a wound in the night. She was no human, and she knew I'd seen her secret. Christmas 2024 was my escape from the city's clamor. At 32, I was burned out, my days a blur of deadlines and crowded subways. The holidays loomed a season I loved, but couldn't face in a cramped apartment. I craved quiet, a place to breathe, to reset. A friend suggested a cabin rental, and I found one online, a weathered log retreat in a snowy mountain valley, 3 hours from civilization. The photos showed a cozy interior, a stone fireplace, and a porch overlooking pines. I booked it Without hesitation, imagining fireside evenings and the hush of falling snow. The drive was grueling my SUV, winding through narrow roads, the sky gray and heavy. Snow dusted the ground, the forest thickening as I climbed higher. By dusk, I reached the valley, a vast bowl of white cradled by jagged peaks. The cabin stood alone, its wooden walls, moss streaked its chimney, silent. I stepped out, my boots sinking into the snow, the air so cold it burned my lungs. The silence was profound, unbroken by wind or wildlife. A stillness that felt alive, watchful. Sensory overload. The cold claws your skin. The snow muffles your steps. The valley looms, and the silence whispers, warning you to leave. A figure emerged from the cabin, holding a lantern, its glow faint in the twilight. Toro, the caretaker, was older than I'd expected, his face lined, his eyes shadowed by dark circles. Like sleep was a stranger. His sweater was frayed, his pants baggy, his movements slow, deliberate. "Welcome," he said, his voice rough, guiding me inside. The cabin smelled of aged wood and damp earth. Its interior, warm but worn, creaky floors, faded rugs, a fireplace ready for kindling. Toro showed me the kitchen, the bedroom. His words clipped, his eyes darting to the windows. As he turned to leave, he paused, his hand on the door. "Don't go into the woods after dark," he said, his voice low, his gaze fixed on the snow beyond. I frowned, expecting a joke, but his face was grim, his eyes haunted. Why, I asked, half laughing. He didn't answer, just stepped out the door, closing behind him, his lantern fading into the dusk. Pattern, interruption. This is your retreat, your peace. But that warning, it's not just caution, is it? I smirked, brushing it off. No sane person would wander in the cold anyway. But his words lingered a splinter in my mind. I unpacked the cabin's warmth, easing my tension. I took a hot bath, the steam curling around me, then cooked dinner pasta, a glass of wine, the fireplace crackling. I sat at a table by a large window, the snow outside glowing faintly in the moonlight. The valley felt timeless, its silence a balm, a peace I hadn't known in years. I sipped my wine, watching flakes dance in the wind, my thoughts drifting soft and unhurried. Halfway through my meal, a sound shattered the calm, a man's cry, raw and anguished, echoing from the woods. I froze, my fork hovering, my heart lurching. Nested, storytelling. Last summer, a colleague told me about a hiker who'd screamed for help in the mountains, lost in a storm. Rescuers found him, but his eyes were wild, like he'd seen something beyond the snow. The cry came again, closer, desperate, cutting through the valley's hush. I set my glass down, my hands trembling, Toro's warning flashing in my mind. Don't go into the woods. But the pain in that voice pulled me a call I couldn't ignore. I grabbed my jacket, my boots, a flashlight, its beam shaky in my grip. I stepped outside, the cold hitting like a slap, the snow falling heavier, now blurring the trees. I called out, "Anyone there?" My voice swallowed by the storm. The cry answered fainter, but near from a thicket beyond the cabin. I moved toward it, my boots sinking the flashlight, cutting a narrow path through the dark. Trance. Loop. It's just a man in trouble. But is it? You're safe in the cabin, but are you? You're helping, but should you? The forest closed around me, its branches clawing at my jacket, the snow stinging my face. I reached a clearing, a dense patch of pines, and heard it wet rhythmic sounds, like chewing, coming from behind a tall tree. My stomach twisted, my instincts screaming to turn back, but I stepped forward, my flashlight raised. The beam fell on a figure crouched in the snow, her back to me, her long black hair spilling over a dark coat. Beside her lay a man, his body still, his face torn, blood pooling beneath him, his eyes gone, replaced by dark, hollow voids. She turned her face, revealed in the light, white as bone, her eyes glowing like a predator's, her mouth smeared with blood, her teeth stained red. 2 black dots marked her forehead like ritual scars, her smile a grotesque slash across her face. Embedded. Command run. Now don't look. Don't stay. She sees you. Doesn't she? I stumbled back, my flashlight falling its beams spinning in the snow. She rose, her movements jerky, unnatural, her smile unchanging, her eyes locked on mine. I turned and ran, my legs shaking the forest, a maze of shadows and ice. My breath burned my heart, pounding in my throat. The cabin's light, a distant beacon. I heard her behind me. Not footsteps, but a presence, a weight in the air closing in. I reached the cabin, slamming the door, twisting the lock. My hands shaking so badly, I dropped my keys. I pushed a couch against the door, my body trembling, my mind replaying her face. Those eyes, that smile, that blood. I sank to the floor. The fireplace's glow, my only anchor. The night outside, alive with her. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. The silence, oppressive, broken only by my ragged breaths. Then, a faint sound, a tap on glass. I looked up, my heart stopping. The window, wide and dark, framed her. She stood outside, her white face pressed close, her smile wider, her eyes unblinking, glowing in the moonlight. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, her gaze pinning me, a predator studying its prey. The fire flickered, casting her shadow across the room, long and twisted like something not human. The staring lasted an eternity, her face carved into my soul. Then a thin ray of dawn touched the window, and she was gone. The snow outside undisturbed her presence, a ghost in the light. I collapsed, my body shaking, my mind refusing to process what I'd seen. She wasn't real. She couldn't be. But her face, her smile, they were burned into me, a truth I couldn't deny. Toro came at 11 a.m., his voice calling my name, pulling me from my stupor. I stumbled to the door, my hands numb, and opened it. He stood there, his eyes searching mine, his face pale. "You saw her, didn't you?" He whispered, his voice heavy with knowing. The white-faced woman. I nodded, unable to speak, the memory choking me. He didn't ask more, just watched as I packed my movements, frantic, my bag shaking in my grip. I handed him the keys, climbed into my SUV, and drove the valley, shrinking in my rear view, but not its hold on me. I haven't returned, haven't spoken of that night. The city's noise is my shield now, its crowds a barrier against the dark. Anchoring. That cabin changed you, didn't it? Every time it snows, you see her. Don't you? I check my windows, my locks, my shadows, always expecting her face, her smile, her eyes. The valley was supposed to be my peace, but it became my prison. A place where the line between real and unreal blurred, leaving me with a fear I can't name. There's one detail I've kept hidden. As I ran, I saw something in the snow near the clearing. A bone, small human, half buried its surface, etched with strange marks. I didn't stop, didn't tell Toro, too terrified to face its truth. But it's there, in my dreams, that bone and her watching from the dark, her smile a promise of something I'll never escape.